Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, NBA reporter for Buha's Block, and welcome to another live show. A live show I was not expecting to do. We have some breaking news from the Lakers. Luka Doncic is going to be reevaluated in a week with a left finger sprain and a lower left leg contusion. So in a big blow for the Lakers, they will now be without LeBron James and Luka Doncic for at least the next week. At least the intel I've been able to gather over the last 30 minutes or so has been that this is not expected to be serious. He is not expected to miss beyond that week if he ends up missing beyond it at all, right? Like, I think they were being cautious with this situation, and the 1 week timetable is a 1 week timetable for a reason. But that is half of the Lakers' salary, more than half the Lakers' salary on their cap sheet. It's their two best players. And this is coming after the Lakers just had an impressive win against the Timberwolves, finally clicked on both sides of the ball. Luka was playing at best player in the world level, MVP level, first team All-NBA level. And now, as they were finally getting a little bit of rhythm and cohesion, this is a short-term setback, but an unfortunate setback nonetheless. And looking at, I'm going to get into life without Luka and what has to happen tonight and moving forward over the next week. Going to look at the upcoming schedule for the Lakers and then get into a little bit of Q&A. Going to try to keep this 30 to 45 minutes because it is a game day, and I am going to be going live later so we can answer some more questions in a bit. But so life without Luka, I think it goes without saying, first and foremost, the player who has to step up is Austin Reeves. And going back to last season, we saw a couple of instances versus Indiana where Luka was right after the trade. Luka and LeBron were both out. Austin steps up, and the Lakers actually beat the Pacers. Then that game in Denver, no Luka, no LeBron. Austin has a big performance, and the Lakers nearly win that one. They go toe-to-toe with Denver at, I believe, full strength. Maybe they were without one player, but they had Jokic, they had Murray, and that was a close game down the wire. Dalton also really stepped up. So I think first and foremost, this is Austin Reeves' moment. This is to show, like, no, he is not going to be the featured guy on this team. Like, of course, in like looking at his contract situation and the future with the Lakers and Austin, it's going to be at best as him being the number two, and more realistically, him being the number three. But this is where I think it is a nice audition to see what it looks like if he is the number one. If Luka does, Luka's not probably going to play 82 games every season, right? So there will be games in the future that Austin will be the primary guy, or at least the co-primary guy. And like, what does that look like? And we have seen flashes of it before, but this is a really big opportunity for Austin to show what he can do in a larger role. And I expect him to put up mid to high 20s and be in that like 8 to 10 assist range. And he's already putting up those numbers next to Luka. So maybe it bumps up even a little bit higher into like the low 30s and 8 to 10 assists, something like that. But Austin, at the same time, Austin is now the number one guy on the scouting report. And there's going to be, if I'm playing the Lakers over the next week, I'm sending a bunch of attention towards Austin and picking him up full court and trying to make him as uncomfortable as possible and blitzing and trapping. And so it's going to be interesting to see how he handles that and how the Lakers 4-on-3, 3-on-2 situations kind of evolve out of this without having Luka out there. So first and foremost, it starts with Austin. Like, this is the guy that you are preparing to pay 30 plus million, 35 plus million. Go out there and show you deserve that, which again, I don't want to say like this stretch will determine that, right? I think longer term, it's about how he fits with Luka, how he plays in the playoffs, how the fit with Luka is in the playoffs. But this is a big stretch for Austin. So I think he's the first guy that I look at to step up. I actually go to number two, everyone's favorite Laker right now, Gabe Vincent. I think he's a guy who we saw in the preseason step up with a certain level of ball handling, and I thought played better with the ball in his hands. And in those stretches when there was no Austin or Luka, he got back to being Miami Gabe. And he is a guy who, despite his off-ball capabilities, despite probably being the best movement shooter right now on the team, or at least in the primary rotation. He's still a guy who's at his best with the ball in his hands. And JJ did not move him to the bench against Minnesota. If there was ever a matchup to move Gabe to the bench, it would be against one of the biggest front lines and just biggest starting groups in the league. He didn't do that. So for now, I'm going to operate under the assumption that Gabe is going to continue to start even with Luka being out. So if Gabe's starting, I think he now becomes the secondary ball handler next to Austin, but then there will be some units where Gabe is probably the primary guy. So I look at Gabe as, can he recapture some of what we saw in the preseason? Can he recapture going back to Miami Gabe, and even some flashes he's had as a Laker over the last couple of years? But he's a guy who I think will have to step up and be somewhere in that like 12 to 15 point range consistently over the next week or so. And we saw he developed some chemistry with DeAndre Ayton in the preseason, hitting him with pocket passes. I think that's actually more in Gabe's wheelhouse compared to lobs. So I actually think there's like a weird wrinkle here where he and DeAndre Ayton might have more natural chemistry compared to him and Austin Reeves or him and Luka. And Gabe, to me, he's a little bit more of a slower, methodical player with the ball. Like he is quick, but he's not a speedster trying to like dash into the paint necessarily. So I actually think there's like a more natural synergy between him and Ayton. So that's I look at him as the number 2 guy. Then we start getting into like who's going to be the 5th starter now. If it were up to me, I would go Austin, Marcus, Jake LaRavia, Rui, and Ayton. Again, I just don't think, I'm not considering Vando because I just don't see a scenario. Like Vando's been the 8th and 9th man through the first 2 games of the season. I don't see him jumping up into starter territory. I think a big reason why he even played 20 minutes against Minnesota was because Jackson was out and he had to play small ball 5. So looking at this, and with that context, Jackson is also out. I haven't even mentioned that yet. Lakers only have 9 official roster players today. So Jackson's out as well. So I think JJ is going to want to stagger the rotation. Maybe we see a little bit of Christian Coloco tonight, but I think Vando is going to be the backup 5. So I don't think JJ is going to start him. However, I think Gabe's going to continue to start. So to me, it comes down to it's Marcus versus Jake LaRavia as the 5th starter. Then one of those guys will come off the bench. You can make arguments in either direction. With LaRavia, you get more size. I think you get a little, I don't want to say more defensive versatility, but like you just get a little bit more size. I think he's a better rebounder than Marcus. Now with Marcus, you get more playmaking, you get the better defender, and you get just that like tenacity and toughness that he's provided over the first couple of games. Between the two, I would lean Marcus, but I wouldn't be surprised if they lean Jake just to keep Marcus staggered from Austin and Gabe and keep some ball handling with the bench group. But Lakers are now looking at whether it's Jake or Marcus. Let's just say for argument's sake, it's Jake and Marcus is the 6th man. You got Vando as the 7th man. Now you're getting to Dalton as the 8th man. And now you're at Bronny at the 9th man, or Nick Smith and Christian Coloco, 2-way guys stepping into the rotation. So I would say for me, it's Austin, it's Gabe 2nd. It's probably tied for 3rd between Jake and Marcus. One of those guys is going to start. One of those guys is going to be the 6th man. Both guys are going to play more. With Marcus, like this is an opportunity, I think, to assume a larger role. With Jake, it's also an opportunity to assume probably more of a larger offensive role with him, because we haven't really seen him figure out his offensive role yet. It's been a lot of just connecting plays as the kind of the wing safety valve, occasionally attacking a closeout, occasionally taking a catch and shoot 3. But I think he's a guy who could get a little bit more involved offensively. Like, to be clear, everyone has to step up. Now I haven't mentioned Rui and Ayton yet because I feel like based on the way they've been used, I see those guys more as finishers rather than initiators, right? So I think Ayton, of course, should get more deep seals, post ups. Maybe they'll run more pick and roll action to get him involved versus leveraging Luka or Austin, which has kind of been their game plan to start. And with Rui's just not really an ISO player. I think he is a guy who can come off of an off-ball action and rise up, or maybe take a couple dribbles. He can attack from the weak side, but I don't think they're going to all of a sudden be like Rui ISO at the top of the key and like create something, right? So I think at first and foremost, the biggest thing the Lakers are losing without Luka is that consistent advantage generator in the half court. And I just rewatched the game yesterday, and it was just absurd how it didn't matter how Minnesota guarded him, what coverage they threw at him, who they threw at him. He just was able to bend and warp their defense. And I think Austin can do that, obviously to a lesser extent, but the Lakers are going to need Gabe and Marcus and Jake LaRavia to do that as well, because I don't think this offense is going to function at the level it needs to win some of these games if those guys aren't doing that, right? So to me, I think Ayton and Rui will get more shots and score, but the reason I'm not putting them as high, in my opinion, on like the who needs to step up list is because I think if the guards and ball handlers aren't stepping up, it's sort of like it's almost all for naught, because I don't think Ayton and Rui are going to be put in positions to do more or to score more if like this team can't get downhill and can't run the offense properly, if that makes sense, right? So certainly Ayton and Rui are probably the two guys, besides Austin and Gabe, who are going to get more shots, more points, all that stuff. But I think they will benefit more if Gabe and Marcus and Jake are creating those advantages for them and getting downhill and running two-man game with them, and then they're more finishers and benefiting from that, if that makes sense. And then looking at the next week here, before we get into the Q&A. So the next week it could be tougher, but it's not easy. So they have at Sacramento tonight, which was a game I was penciling in the Lakers to win. I think they can still win tonight, especially because from if you think about it from like Sacramento's standpoint, they were preparing to guard Luka and having a game plan for Luka, and Luka coming off the two performances he just had. And now it's like, you got to scrap that entire game plan. And they're, I'm sure, spiraling to some degree to try and figure out like, okay, now maybe we're going to apply a lot of what we did against Luka, against Austin, but they are like different players, even though they are going to be both heavy usage pick and roll guys. So I think Sacramento's defense is bad enough that the Lakers can win tonight with an impressive offensive performance. But then they get the gift of going back home and playing Portland tomorrow, second night of a back-to-back, a Portland group that, in my opinion, has been one of the more impressive groups to start the season overall. They're looking like a potential play-in team, and they are young, athletic, tough. They obviously they're dealing with the Chauncey Billups stuff, but they didn't miss a beat without him in their last game, and they're a group that like they're rotating in defenders and they're just wreaking havoc in the half court. And that's a matchup that I think the Lakers could really miss Luka in, because this is going to really test the ball handling, the decision making, the passing, the turnovers. Can you get back in transition? Like the Portland one, I think is going to be a particularly tough matchup without Luka. Then they go on the road at Minnesota, at Memphis, and Minnesota is going to be looking to get their revenge for this loss, and especially without Luka, it's going to be a lot of just them pressuring the ball, and that's going to be a tough one, tough environment. At Memphis, I think, again, we never know who's in or out for Memphis, so a week from now, that's a lot of time, but that's going to be another tough one. I think they're 2-1 to start the season, if I'm not mistaken. And then depending on, like, this is the one thing I have to note here is this is reevaluated in a week. This is not like returning in a week, because the Lakers are famous for their reevaluations and those extending. I think with Luka, there's obviously going to be a lot of attention on when is he coming back, and there's going to be questions mid next week and late next week. And it sounds like, as I said at the top, that he will likely only miss a week, but they do have a home game against Miami. Then they go out to Portland, play Portland again, second night of a back-to-back. So they're getting a young, tough defensive Portland team twice on the second night of a back-to-back. That's not an easy back-to-back in either scenario, but yeah, home Miami, then back out to Portland. So they, for the next 6 games, are on the road. I wouldn't say any of these games I'm penciling in as a win. I wouldn't say any of these games I'm necessarily penciling in as a loss, other than probably at Minnesota. I think realistically, like 2-4 would be a win over the next 6 games. Now, this is like if Luka comes back, then that changes it. But depending on, like, do you want to bring him back directly into a back-to-back? That, or maybe he just plays one side of the back-to-back, right? Like that's just something to think about. But I'm looking at probably 4 to 6 games here, at least 4, maybe 6 on the upper end. And again, maybe he comes back on that back-to-back and just plays on one side of it. But it's not the toughest stretch in the world, right? Like there's no OKC, no Denver, no Cleveland, no New York. These are like Portland, Sacramento, Memphis. Those are like relatively winnable games. Miami, but it's going to be tough, right? And multiple guys are going to have to step up. You're going to need this group locked in defensively, defending at the level they did against Minnesota. You're going to need them gang rebounding. That's another aspect they're really going to miss Luka, is the defensive glass. He's been rebounding at a high level. He's probably, I mean, he's been their best starter from a rebounding perspective, but probably overall like the second best, I guess, behind Ayton. And that's a big thing that they're going to have to try to figure out. And that's probably why I lean LaRavia being the 5th starter and Marcus being the 6th man, and then staggering him with Austin and Luka. But with all that said, let's get into the Q&A. See, we got a few super chats here. First one from Trey. Thank you, fans, in quotes. Missing your 2 best players for any extent of time in the West is a death sentence, at least. We have our pick this year. Upside down emoji. Yeah, it's going to be really tough. Like, to be honest, and, I try to keep it as real as I can on here. I think they probably go 1-3 over the next 4 games. I think they lose to Portland and Minnesota, and I think they beat one of Sacramento or Memphis. I think tonight's probably the most winnable of those. Like, on paper, to me, Sacramento's the worst of the 4 teams. It is a road game, but again, I think there's like an element of surprise especially like the first game, because I also referenced like the stretch where Austin was the primary guy, but those were like one-off situations. We haven't seen a stretch like this where it's going to be a week, potentially a week plus, with Austin as the primary guy, and teams can kind of game plan for that. So I think there's like an element of surprise for tonight's game plan where the Lakers can come up with something to kind of, like, JJ has had these one-off game plans where you can kind of muck the game up or catch the team by surprise or something. But the second there's film on whatever the Lakers are trying to do without Luka, Portland's going to have that advantage going into tomorrow. But like looking at Minnesota, Memphis, and if this lingers on, once you have like a multi-game sample of this is what the Lakers are running, this is what they're trying to do, this is who's more involved, the scouting reports are going to be out on how to stop or how to counter the Lakers, right? So I think tonight is really the important game to try to steal. And then the rest of the week is going to be really tough, because those are all, Portland to me is a play-in contender. Minnesota is, to me, a top 6 lock. Memphis is also a play-in contender, and that's a road game where the Lakers have been up and down over the last few years, So then you got Miami. I think Miami at home is a winnable one, and then at Portland back-to-back, that's a tough one. So that's where I see probably 2-4 over the next 6 games. But yeah, I mean, in the West, you have no margin for error, and this is where already being down LeBron, and remember, they're also down Jackson, so that changes. Now you're playing either Vando or Christian Coloco as your backup 5, although I thought Vando looked pretty good against Minnesota in that role. I think he'll be fine against Sacramento. So, well, yeah, I mean, it's not a good, like, there's not much upside here, right? Like, if we're being honest, I think the only thing maybe is figuring out, like, getting DeAndre more involved, Jake, Marcus, some of the new pieces getting a little bit more acclimated overall with the group and offensively, but you could have still done that with Luka and won more games. Jabba the Hutt, thank you for the super chat. What they mean by reevaluated in 1 week, is that 1 week from today or 1 week from the Wolves game? My understanding is 1 week from today. That is why I'm operating under the assumption he will be out. He's going to miss, I believe, the next 4 games. So technically, the Miami game is directly 7 days from now. So I think that's the game where it might be like a game time decision. But my understanding of what that's supposed to mean is a week from today, because he was questionable going into today. So they officially ruled him out and gave him the diagnosis today. So my understanding, it's a week from today. Sarah, thank you for the super chat. Lower leg contusion is what the Mavs said when he was managing the torn calf in preseason last year. Any idea if that's a concern? My understanding is it's not expected. It's not that level of seriousness, whatever that leg contusion is, and he's not expected to be out past the next week. You know, again, they have a back-to-back directly coming out of this week, so that might be I think on the high side, it's supposed to be 6 games, but again, the caveat I will apply with all Lakers injury stuff is like, I'll say going back, I don't know if I've ever said this publicly, but going back a couple years ago, I had reported that I was hearing Jared Vanderbilt was going to be out the rest of, I think this is the 23-24 season. Yeah, so 2 years ago, that Vando was going to be out. That I was hearing Vando was out the rest of the season. And I had someone who I trusted and someone, but someone who's in the know and someone who's high up, I will say, in the hierarchy there, correct me and be like, no, like there's like, we're optimistic that Vando's going to be back before the end of the season and this and that. And I believe then I reported like actually hearing from a Lakers source that there's some optimism. Vando might be back, blah, blah, blah. Vando never returned. So that, you remember that was when he was kind of cleared for the Denver series, but then he never actually played in the Denver series. And so with the Lakers stuff, like I'm very, there's always for me, a healthy level of skepticism as to any of their injury stuff, because I mean, that's one example. I could go back to the Kendrick Nunn situation. I could go back to Christian Wood. I could go back to Jackson. I could go back to, I mean, there's multiple Vando situations like this. Gabe Vincent. We have a history of reevaluation. I mean, even Adu Thero was supposed to be back. Remember, they were saying he was going to be back the following week. Like he was out that week. Then he was supposed to be back the next week. Then we didn't hear anything for a week. Then it's like, oh, he's actually going to be reevaluated in 2 to 3 weeks. So I think with Luka, it's such a big topic that, and like so important for the health of the team, right? Like this is dramatic. Like if we knew going to the season, this team did not have Luka and LeBron, it's clearly a lottery team, right? Like there's no doubt about that we would be projecting them as one of the worst teams in the league without Luka and LeBron. Like this team is a pretty top heavy team that the success is based upon Luka being a top 3 player in the world, LeBron being an all NBA guy, Austin being like a fringe all-star, and then some of the other role players playing up to their contracts, being healthy. But without the top 2 guys, like this is a lottery team. So I think it's going to be hard for them to kind of like, you know, I don't want to be careful with what I say, but it's going to be hard for them to not kind of keep the transparency with this injury, right? Like it's a little bit easier with some of the other guys when they're bench players or like back end rotation guys. This is Luka, right? So my understanding is he's expected to be back around that 1 week mark. Again, coming out of that, they go directly into a back-to-back. So I'd be surprised if off of this injury, he's playing in a back-to-back on both sides. So it's just something to monitor. Kevin, thank you for the super chat. Last chance for DK to restore his value. Yeah, so I didn't even mention DK, and I'm glad you brought him up. I know I saw a lot of people on social mentioning DK and Nick Smith. Certainly it's a chance for both of them, right? I think Nick Smith has an opportunity as a 2-way guy. Dalton, I expect now to be a full-time rotation player over the next week. I still think, just in the pecking order, in like the 2-way value for guys, like I'm still viewing the perimeter guys as Austin, Gabe, Marcus, Jake, and then I guess DK 5th, Nick Smith 6th. Like, despite what we know those guys can do offensively, with Dalton, we already know about the defensive stuff. With Nick Smith, I thought the defense was pretty bad in the preseason, and I quickly was like, I see the flashes offensively. I just don't think he looks like a playable guard. Like it's kind of similar to Dalton, where you see the talent, you see the skill, but you're like, oh yeah, he makes all these mistakes that he's not rotating, he's misjudging how to navigate a screen, he's not boxing out, he's he's in between 2 guys trying to make the right decision, makes the wrong decision. And seeing that, I was like, okay, well, comparing that to Marcus and Jake And not that those guys don't ever make mistakes, but like their defensive floor is just much, much higher. That at the same time, we have a history of JJ prioritizing offense and shooting. So maybe like Dalton's going to be a rotation guy. So I agree with you. Like this is Dalton's chance to restore his value. He's going to be in the rotation. I think they might really lean on that top 7, and like Dalton's maybe like a 12 to 15 minute a guy. Maybe Nick Smith is like an 8 to 10 minute a night guy. And I think there's only so much they could do in those minutes where like the other top 7 are all playing like 25 plus minutes, something like that. But we'll see. Yeah. I mean, definitely an opportunity for Dalton. I think it's still primarily going to be like Austin, Gabe, Jake, Marcus as the ball handlers, initiators, kind of offensive guys trying to set up Ayton and Rui, but we'll see. Like he does have an opportunity here. My mom always asks the tough questions. She always asks the questions that could potentially get me in trouble. Thank you for the super chat. Thankfully, we won big, but are the Lakers jinxed? I don't think the Lakers are jinxed. I will note that, and I feel this way with Memphis especially. There are, in New Orleans, like there are some teams over the last few years that for whatever reason have had really rough injury luck. I would throw the Lakers in there. I would throw New Orleans in there. I would throw Memphis in there. I think Miami is a team that's in there. Probably, I mean, Philly. Philly might be jinxed. I don't know about that one. But you know, they probably upset the basketball gods with the process. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I believe in jinxing, but I think there's been something up with like this team has just not been able to stay healthy. They're always dealing with in training camp something, and so I think it's more coincidence than anything. But it is interesting to me that there's been like 5 to 6 teams, it feels like, that have dealt with a lot of injuries over the last few years, and the Lakers have been among them. Sarah says, we love you, Mama Buha. Randy Dust says, Mama Buha is a baddie. Alex Costello with another one. Thank you for the super chat. Why do the NBA injury gods hate us? I don't know. I mean, I'll say the Lakers they've since I've been 6 seasons covering them, they've had multiple training staffs and medical staffs, and they've turned it over multiple times. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know what happened to get this. I would say it's more bad luck than anything. But yeah, certainly an unfortunate situation. I mean, and going back, remember like with LeBron, it was through his first 50. It was before LeBron got there. I think they just had the graphic on the game yesterday that I saw. But it was like LeBron's first 15 years in the league, he averaged 75 games a season. The last 7, which have all come as a Laker, he's down at like 56 or 59, something like that. And obviously one of the years was the COVID year. And then the following year, they only played 72. So like the numbers are going to be artificially skewed a little bit. But LeBron, I mean, from when I started covering LeBron, the first 3 years, he didn't play over 60 games in any of them. Right. So that's been a thing. And now Luka dealing with this. So yeah, and Luka arriving to LA, obviously already dealing with the calf stuff. So it's been tough for them. Tommy Gold says it's 1 week, y'all being dramatic. LOL. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a healthy perspective. Like, I will note that if the Lakers go, let's say like 1-3 or 2-4, let's just say he misses 4 games or he misses 6 games. I mean, right now, the West has, I mean, it's so early. Most teams have only played 2 games, but the West has 11 teams at 1-1 or better. You got OKC 3-0, San Antonio 2-0. 1-3 or 2-4, like, probably puts them right now as a lottery team. I think like the West is probably going to have 6 to 8 teams challenging for high 40s into potentially even 50s. We've seen multiple West seasons where the 8 seed wins 50 games or is like right there, 49-ish games. So it's just, I think the bigger issue or bigger concern for me, it's like a step, it's undeniably a step back from the continuity perspective, because they just don't, this is valuable time that they would have been getting without, with Luka. Now that it's going to be without Luka. But then the real thing is like the West is, go back to last year, the Lakers tied with Denver and the Clippers for the 3 seed, and they won the individual tiebreakers. But if they had a stretch like they had a stretch like this, that probably cost them, and they're probably a 47-win team or 48-win team, and all of a sudden now you're maybe in the play-in, and like that could be the difference between the 7 seed and the 3 seed, the 7 seed and the 4 seed. Might just be a matter of 1 or 2 games, and that's not to say that they can't make this up later in the season. They certainly can, but unless they go 4-0 here, which is technically possible, but I think very unlikely, it's hard to not think that they were impacted to some degree and probably dropped an extra game or 2 that very well could affect them later in the season. But like long term, I don't think. I'm still like bullish on the Lakers, especially coming off this Minnesota game, rewatching it. There was a lot to be encouraged by. There was a lot of impressive stuff they did on both sides of the ball. So I'm still like trending in a positive direction with the Lakers, like longer term, big picture outlook. But it's certainly a short-term setback that could have implications for the playoffs. Drip Show asks, does my mom have a YouTube channel? She does not. My wife has a YouTube channel, so I would recommend you all check out Helena Buha, Helene. And she's also doing her nurse influencing. But you can follow my mom on social. Just search Norma Maldonado. Sarah, on the positive side, this gives Reeves and Ayton a big chance to get reps together. I agree. I think you're going to fast track that chemistry. I think it's going to get Gabe going a little bit. He's been iced out of the offense and could just get, in general, more usage and involvement for DeAndre and Rui. Connor, do you have any clue when the calf contusion happened? There was a moment, and I caught it live. I didn't think twice about it on the rewatch, so I'm struggling to remember exactly when. There was a moment where he kind of tweaked his leg that I thought it was more of like the groin hip thing that he was dealing with coming out of the Golden State game. And so but he continued playing. He obviously finished the game the way that he finished the game. So I didn't think twice about it. And then the one thing I did notice was like, obviously he hurt his hand early in that game. I think it might've been like literally a minute or 2 in, I believe it was actually on a defensive possession with Jaden McDaniels. And then he had to have it immediately wrapped, and then he still went on to have the performance that he had. The one thing I will note with this, and this was like my only minor concern with Luka's start, is I just think it's unreasonable to put that type of workload on any player. And this is not a Luka specific thing. This is like just guys will get worn out with the workload of every single possession going through them, right? And I know, I guess you could point to previous seasons in Dallas and Luka being able to do that. But I just think at this stage of his career, it would be nice for him to have to do a little bit less. And I'm pulling up the usage percentage right now. He's at, so this is wild. Luka's at 41.1% usage percentage. His career high is 37.4, which happened in 2021, 2022. To go back to that 2023-24 season when he was in the MVP mix, arguably, I would say his best season up to this point. That's when he led Dallas to the finals, 36% usage percentage. So even 36 to 41.5, it sounds like not a big gap. It's 5.1%, right? Numbers are all relative. That's a huge difference in usage. And I think the biggest reason why his usage is so high right now is because LeBron is out. And when LeBron returns, they're going to have the 3-headed monster of Luka, LeBron, and Austin. But I think the Lakers coming out of this, and this could be the silver lining here ultimately, right, is figuring out other ways to run the offense through other players, and not just Austin, right? Because Austin, I can look it up right now, his usage percentage. His usage percentage was probably too high as well. I think this has got to be more about like, how do we unlock, if you're JJ Redick and you're the coaching staff looking at it, it's like, how can I unlock Marcus? How can I unlock Gabe a little bit more? How can I unlock Jake LaRavia a little bit more? And so Austin's usage right now is 27%, highest of his career. I think it dipped after actually the Minnesota game. I think it was in like the low 30s after the Golden State game. But I think that the big thing here is just that, like, the silver lining could be more people doing more and taking more off Luka's plate, because as great as Luka has looked, I mean, maybe if it's just a month, that's one thing, but I don't think you can ask him to hold a 41% usage percentage for the next month or whenever LeBron returns. Swan, thank you for the super chat. Oh, my mom says she does have a YouTube channel. Demos of her acting. So if you want to put that somewhere in the chat, I will. My mom says, thank you for the super chat. I'm going to be optimistic and say the bench will step up, and after healing, the players will come in strong. Yes, I have a YouTube demo of my acting gigs. All right, so let's promote the YouTube. Is it just Normal Maldonado? I feel like I didn't even know you had a YouTube, so we're breaking some news here. Rama's Aviation says I look tired. Thank you. I appreciate it. I did have a late night last night. Let my hair down a little bit. Went out. So, I was not expecting to go live at 1:30 in the afternoon. Sarah says having Kyrie there helped Luka so much. And that's where I think Austin, he's not Kyrie, to be 100% clear. But, I mean, he's already averaging, I think he's done his part for the most part. He's averaging 25 points, 6 rebounds, and 10 assists. It's hard to ask more from Austin. I think that's pretty much Austin hitting his ceiling. So other guys have to step up. Adrian, can our two-way guys play? Yes, they can. And I believe they will tonight. I think Koloko and Nick Smith probably play. Mitch Potter, will Bronny get non-garbage time minutes now? Potentially, because they have 9 guys available outside of the two-way guys. I think with the two-way guys, they'll have 11 guys available. But I think there's a clear top 8, which is the 7 of the typical rotation guys plus Dalton at number 8. Then we get into the Koloko, Bronny, Nick Smith part of the rotation. I could see maybe Koloko getting, especially like tonight they're playing Sabonis, who has given AD problems, let alone like we'll see how he fares against Ayton. We'll see how he fares against Vando and small ball looks, but maybe Koloko gets called upon. Then you get into Nick Smith versus Bronny, at which point I would argue Nick Smith outplayed Bronny. I don't think either guy was like that impressive overall in preseason, but between like Bronny really struggled, to be clear. Nick Smith, I thought, had some offensive flashes, but I thought the defense was pretty bad. So, I mean, between the two, I would honestly play Nick Smith over Bronny. That's just a little tough when you have like a two-way guard versus an official roster guard and like playing that guy over that guy. But this is the NBA. This is not like you got to try to win these games and play the best players. So I kind of lean toward maybe Bronny gets like a shift and they just kind of see how he does in that shift. But I think it might be more of that top 7, top 8, really leaning on those guys. Maybe Koloko gets a look and they stay a little bit bigger. And then if you really need another guard, I think Nick Smith should be ahead of Bronny in the pecking order. Anto says, any update on Adu? No update yet, though we should be, I believe next week is when we're supposed to be getting the update. Omar says, how about Drew Timme? South Bay just traded for him. He would have to be called up, or he'd have to sign a two-way to be eligible to play. So that's something to monitor. Sukraj says, I'm visiting LA from November 2nd to 8th, and right after I booked a trip, LeBron gets injured, and now Luka shaking my head. I'm sorry. That stinks. Now, the positive here is that, so looking at the 7th to the 8th, I mean the 2nd to the 8th, I think Luka will be back by that November 5th game. So if there's any way to, if you're trying to get tickets, I would, like, don't hold me entirely accountable, because again, there's always the weird stuff with the reevaluation periods and stuff with the injuries, but it sounds like Luka will be back by that November 5th game against San Antonio. My mom says better if people go to my IMDb. So she linked her IMDb. Adrian, we need Chris Magnon to play to see what he has on the defensive end. Yeah, the only thing is he's been dealing with that ankle injury. I don't think we've gotten an update in a little bit on him, so maybe he's available, but since we haven't heard anything, I think he's probably out. Tali Khalifa asks, side note, Jovan, how are your fantasy football seasons going? I'm only in 2 leagues this year, and no, take that back. I mean, well, I accidentally joined a public league, so that's been a fun one because I thought I was doing a mock draft and I joined a public league. So now my team is stacked because no one, I don't know if I think everyone thought they were doing a mock draft and accidentally joined the league, and no one has set like their lineups or done free agency transactions. So I'm just racking up Yahoo, points and stuff because you got your statuses of like, platinum, gold, silver, bronze with Yahoo of like your fantasy success or whatever. So racking up some free wins in that, which was accidental. But my 2 serious leagues, one of them I'm 2-5, about to be 2-6. My season's gone off the rails. That was actually my best roster. Like that was the Gibbs, Henry, Bucky start, but I have a whole issue with that league of it's waiver prior or like, in order of record. So I didn't get Bucky. I've had some rough injury luck in that one. And then the waivers are just, in my opinion, pretty dumb where you can't act like, I like when you spend on waivers because then it's a whole strategy thing of you have a certain budget and it becomes an auction style. Like how much am I willing to spend to get this player? Whereas the waiver order priority, to me, that's like stupid. So it's entirely out of your control of whether you get a player or not. Then in my more serious league, though, with my childhood friends, I am tied for first. I'm 5-2, tentatively looking like I'm going to be 6-2. Although I hope I didn't jinx myself, even though I said earlier I don't believe in jinxes. And that one I'm doing well, and I've played the waiver wire really well because it's an auction waiver wire, and I like to know what I'm doing. Couch says Buha got Yahoo'd accidental public league to fudge their numbers. I guess. I don't know. Maheen, thank you for the super chat. Can you walk us through how the injury reporting process works in the NBA? Seems like Lakers have their own process. Well, so, I mean, there's supposed to be constant injury updates throughout. Like, so I believe it's 5 o'clock local time of the day before the game, right? So like yesterday, the Lakers are playing Pacific, obviously because they're in Sacramento. But so like 5 p.m. yesterday, they had to release an injury report for the projection of today's game, and that's when Luka was questionable, Jackson was questionable, and then they listed the out guys. So they do that the day before the game, which is supposed to be again, I believe 5 p.m. local time for the game. So sometimes, obviously, if they're on the East Coast or Central Time, it's going to be a little bit earlier in the day for us on the West Coast. So that's supposed to be like the closest assessment of what is going to happen for tomorrow. So like loosely probable means 75-ish% they're going to play. Questionable is 50-50. And then doubtful is like 25%. So based on that, like probable basically means you're most likely going to play unless something drastic happens. Questionable is a true 50-50, could go either way. And then doubtful is almost certainly going to miss, but like there's a slight chance. And then they'll do testing in the morning. Sometimes there'll be a game time decision. They'll do testing at the arena. The player will go through their pregame warm up. They'll go through like maybe a quick weight routine, maybe do a little bit of cardio, and then at that point make an assessment on whether the player can play. So with Luka, clearly, and it was interesting that they added the leg injury because I feel like that's probably, I don't have great clarity yet on which is the driving force for him missing, because he was able to play through the finger sprain, right? So, and he dropped, 50-point triple-double basically. So I think if it was just the finger sprain, he probably could play through it and maybe have to adapt the ball handling, like, shooting to some degree, right? But we just saw him do it. We've seen Kobe do it. Like it's possible. But adding in the leg contusion, I think, was probably what was the straw that just knocked him out of, okay, let's just be cautious with this. Let's be careful with it. So Lakers have their own process. I think to your point here, I think their process is more of, you're supposed to try to be as transparent as possible with, like, we're going to be reevaluated over this stretch or this or that. And that's where I think sometimes, like, they're not fully forthcoming with, I think they've gotten better at it, but it's still been a bit of an issue of a guy's supposed to be reevaluated over a certain amount of time. And then it's just like crickets when that time comes. Or it's kicking the can down the road of, like, okay, well, another week, another 2 weeks, this and that. So I think more of the reevaluation process is where they might diverge a little bit from the rest of the league. But in terms of, like, the actual injury updates and statuses for the games, they take that stuff very seriously, because also the backdrop to all of this is, like, the gambling stuff. And that's become so ingrained in the NBA that player statuses are important parts of, like, whether, like, the lines and the prop bets and all that stuff. So that's its own thing where I think they kind of have to take it seriously with how embedded the gambling is to all this. And then Mahin follows up again. Don't they have to be as transparent? Don't they have to be transparent as per league rules? Yes, with the injury designations for each game, yes. With a timetable, because, like, if you, let's just say, like a new Theodore, right? Like, we haven't gotten a recent update with him. They just say, like, 2 to 3 weeks, and then they just keep listing him as out. And that's being transparent that he is out, but, like, we're not getting the context of, well, when is he going to be back? When's the next reevaluation period, right? Like, so I think they are transparent, to be clear, like, in their designations and when, like, if a guy's just out and you see he's out, that's being transparent because the guy's out. But I think more so where the fan frustration and sometimes the reporter frustration can be is we don't get clarity in, like, the process of when are they actually being reevaluated? Is this thing more serious than is originally being led on? And it feels like sometimes there's a little bit of just lack of transparency with the process, right? Because we have multiple examples of guys initially being out for, like, 2 weeks that ended up being multi-month injuries. And I'm not naturally a conspiracy theorist, but I find it hard to believe that an initial, like, 2-week projection got turned into a multi-month absence especially when the guy was, like, resting and not doing anything. It just feels like they wanted to kind of sell some optimism, if that makes sense. Anto asked, what is my projected Lakers record with Luka being out for the next week? I said 1-3, and I'm not trying to be a pessimist here. I'm just being realistic that I think this is a lottery team if they don't have LeBron and Luka. You can call me crazy. You can call me a hater. You can call me pessimistic. But sorry that I think take the two best players off almost any team, but this is a relatively top-heavy team. Now, the caveat I will apply is, like, I think they can go 2-2. I think that's probably the most optimistic view here. I just think, like, Sacramento, I think, is the most winnable of these four. I think Portland's second out of a back-to-back will be tough, but, like, Portland is, like, they're probably a play-in, like, back-end play-in team, so they're beatable, and it's certainly possible. I mean, they could go 2-0 and make me look foolish right now, but I think realistically they probably split this back-to-back. At Minnesota, I think is just, especially coming off of this last game, I think that's probably a loss. And then at Memphis, maybe they could win that and go 2-2, but I'm leaning 1-3 because I'm trying to be realistic here. It's also not just, like, the Luka injury, it's they're without LeBron, they're without Jackson for the time being, they're without Adu, they're without Maxey. Like, they're now in a situation where we're talking about Dalton as the eighth man, and it's not like a position he's really earned. It's just kind of a position being given. Like, he's not, to me, look like a rotation guy. He's just kind of forced into this right now. Then we're talking about playing Nick Smith and Bronny, and it just gets really dire. Like, those are not guys that should be playing rotation minutes right now. So I want to, like, leave some flexibility to be wrong. And certainly we've seen teams go on heaters for stretches where they beat good teams. And I think that's possible. I just also think, if we're being honest with how they've looked up to this point in the season, they have been heavily carried by Luka. And now you take that guy. Like without Luka in the first two games, I think they get blown out in both games. I don't think that's like a controversial opinion here. So we'll see. Tommy Gold says 500, so he's saying 2-2. Wombat, remember when Reeves cooked Boston? Yeah, so I'm actually glad you brought this up. I wanted to make this point earlier. So the two games I referenced last year were Indiana and Denver. But go back 2 years ago, I will never forget this. We go to shoot around in Boston, and especially like traveling, being on a road trip, sometimes being on the East Coast, like your time clock gets messed up. So I got up for shoot around and I just hit a wall and I was like, I need to go take a nap. So I go take a nap and I wake up and LeBron and AD are both out. And I'm like, what just happened? Like, I was excited for the game. I'm like, they're playing Boston. That's obviously the year Boston won the title and like they're the best team in the league. And it's like, this is a big matchup, big test for the Lakers, Celtics, all the history, all that stuff. We're in Boston. I wake up and LeBron and AD are out, and I'm like, wow, this game they're going to get blown out tonight. This is, this game is it just stinks. Then, that's the game Vando got injured, but Austin goes off and Jackson had a big game and Vando had a big game. And I'm forgetting who else had a big game in that game, but it's certainly possible. That's why I said I think the Sacramento game is the most winnable, because I think you can catch teams off guard and with like an element of surprise in the first game without a star. But then once there's film and data on how you're going to play, they will change the game plan. So that's why I think the Sacramento game is the most winnable of these four. I also think they're the worst team of the four. So that combination of catching them by surprise, not being able to prepare for this, and also them being the worst, like tonight's, I think, the night for LA to win it. Tony says we lost one of the games with Luka, but you're talking like we won the game. I'm not talking like Tony's going off in the chat. I don't know what's up with this. Connor Phillips, I think AR can carry to 2 wins if everything goes well. I think it's possible. Like I think I'm in between 1-3 and 2-2. I'm not gonna say 4-0, right? Like I think anybody who's saying that's I don't think that's realistic. Dave S. only have 9 players healthy for the game, and that includes Dalton and Bronny. Now they're calling up, I believe they're calling up Koloko and Nick Smith to have 11, but it's still just 11 players. All right, I'm going to wrap here at the 1 hour mark. So Mahin, why is Sacramento not at the right with the combo players they have? I think that the biggest reason for me is the defense. I think like we saw this in Chicago, where they kind of recreated Chicago West here with just Sabonis in the Vucevic role, where Sabonis is better than Vucevic and even that version of Vucevic a few years ago. But I think there's a limitation to how good you could be defensively with Domantas Sabonis as your rim protector, as your primary 5. I think ideally you need like a Jaren Jackson Jr. type or a Chet Holmgren type, or I'm trying to think of some of the other double big. Like you need a big who can protect Porzingis. You need a big who can protect the rim and be your primary rim protector, and then space the floor on offense around Sabonis. They don't have that player, and that to me is like already starting Sabonis, playing him mid-30s a night. You're going to be a bottom 10 defense. Then you add in DeRozan and Levine, who, again, we just saw be part of this Chicago group with Vucevic, who's a similar, I'd say Sabonis is better defensively, but similar issues. That's just a recipe for, like, those guys are not good enough to be the 2 best players on, like, a good team right now, but then you also factor in their individual defensive concerns. They're also without Keegan Murray, so now DeRozan's playing a lot of 4. Then you add in, like, I like Dennis Schroeder, but he's probably in a little bit of a inflated role here. Russ, I don't need to get into. I just think like they have names and they have guys who like used to be good. I think all these guys are worse than they were a couple of years ago. And then they all for the most part, don't play defense. And the guys who play defense on this team are Keon Ellis, who's buried in the bench. I really like Nick Clifford, but he's also kind of like, to me, they need to just tear this down and rebuild around like Keegan Murray, Keon Ellis, Nick Clifford, and some of the interesting young guys they have. But they continue to try and be on this treadmill of mediocrity, because I think their ceiling is like the 9 seed this year. I do not see any scenario in which I think their absolute best case scenario is the 9 seed, barring like multiple top 8 West teams having multiple big injuries that like knock them out. If everyone is like relatively healthy or just like relative expectations, I don't see how they're above the 9 seed. And that's the 9 seed as in like a play-in team who loses in the play-in tournament and doesn't make the playoffs. So I'm pretty low on Sacramento. Not as low as Zach Lowe. I don't know if you saw Zach Lowe. Zach Lowe called them the Hindenburg. Oh, I see. I missed. Sorry, Swan. I missed your super chat. Apologies. Thank you for the super chat. What do you think about Dylan Jones and Drew Timmy? Why is Chris Magnon not playing? Chris Magnon is not playing because he has an ankle injury, kind of another injury that we weren't really told about. And I see I missed a couple super chats. I apologize. I will get back to those. But Chris Magnon has been dealing with an ankle injury. That's why he has not been playing. Dylan Jones and Drew Timmy, I think, are both interesting players. I saw Mike Garcia talking about Dylan Jones as a sort of a THT type, but a bit of a better ball handler and rebounder. And I thought that sounded interesting. Drew Timmy, I don't know that he's an NBA player, but he's obviously a very good G League player. And I think we have seen that translate, just even looking at like Lakers situations. Like a guy like Jay Huff did really well at the G League level and then did not really fare well with the Lakers, but then ended up going to Memphis and played well, and then now is in Indiana. So I think those guys are a couple guys to monitor. Like between the two, Dylan Jones is more interesting to me, and I think he could really push Smith and Magnon for a two-way spot. But I think for now, the plan will be to have those guys with South Bay, and then depending on the needs of the group, maybe they earn a two-way spot. Jabba the Hutt. Thank you for the super chat. Just to add, the Mavs listed the strain as a bruise last year because he got injured in private. It's pretty hard to hide something like this in a game. Good context. You're talking about Luka's calf situation. And yeah, I mean, I think with the way he was moving against Minnesota, I don't know when, again, I want to say it was in the second half, but he continued to play. I think he kind of got tired in that game, and that's why he had like 32 in the first half, 17 in the second half, which it's funny to say like 17 in the second half is it's still impressive. But yeah, I mean, I think this is where LA just got to be careful with his workload. And then in defense of the genre, have you heard whether AD will go on a diet? Thank you for the super chat. I have not heard. Obviously, Dallas has had a rough start, and it's not looking good for Mavericks fans. AD's my guy. He'll always be my guy. He was great in LA, and we had a good relationship. So on a personal note, I hope things work out for him. But yeah, it's not been a good start in Dallas. And then Drip Show, check your email about the free Drip Show canvas. Thank you. I know I got to respond to that. I appreciate you. About to wrap here. Gonna wrap here, but I will be back in a few hours, coming live after the Lakers-Kings game. So I will talk to you guys then, but appreciate you guys for tuning in. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. Shout out to the Late Night Gang. Appreciate you all. Talk to you all in a few hours.